Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first Q&A for this year's conference. We will be talking with Mama Nia Wilson from SpiritHouse Incorporated in Durham, North Carolina, who's labeled as SpiritHouse NC on the Zoom. My name is Praycious Wilson-Gay, and I am the community programs manager of the mobile unit at the Public Theater. I am a Black woman. I am chocolate. I have on some gloss right now, some square earrings. I have on what is this, an orange top with a black collar, and I'm sitting behind sitting in front of a light gray wall. Just to give a little, well, one, this is a Q&A, so please submit your questions to the chat, and I will ask them to Mama Nia. I'll actually call on you to see if you want to ask it yourself, and if not, I will go ahead and take the responsibility of asking. This is for the I Am Worthy of My Yes featured speaker that happened earlier on Monday for you all to watch and peruse. I hope that you enjoyed the guided meditation at the beginning. And yeah, I think to give just a little synopsis for those that may not have watched the session before coming to this Q&A, we spoke about, it began with a guided meditation by Mama Nia Wilson, who it was essentially about just centering yourself and grounding yourself through such an uncertain time. And I hope that with the world changing as quickly as it is, it's something that we can all refer back to for comfort if need be, as well as something to share to our participants if we have that type of, if we're able to provide that type of access to our participants. And then we went into a conversation about Collective Sun and SpiritHouse Incorporated, that production, performance, ritual, collective healing experience that SpiritHouse Incorporated has been doing over the years, starting in 2012. We went into a little bit about that process and how we use art as a healing mechanism in Durham, North Carolina for those that choose to participate with SpiritHouse. And so that was essentially the gist of it. If you have not watched it, I ask that you go back and watch it because it's really amazing. And I found very timely, especially because, you know, it's funny, the day after we got the news about who would be our potential president-elect, but that moment was created in a moment of uncertainty. So I think it just speaks to how relevant we try to be. So yeah, I will let Mama Nia speak for a little while if she wants to introduce herself or say anything to begin, and then we can go into the Q&A. And please submit your questions to the chat. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Praycious. I'm sitting here. I know y'all keep seeing me moving around because I'm looking at the way the sun is glaring, and I know it's okay. It's just bothering me. So excuse me if I seem to continue to change my positions. It feels good to be sitting in the sun with the sun hitting my face. And that's most important to me, but I do want you to be able to see me. So should I say, I'm wearing a hoodie, a brown hoodie that says ritual on it. I have my head wrapped with a white scarf, and I have headphones in my ears. My ritual hoodie has a baobab tree on it, which is a symbol of us being able to have long life and deep roots. And it is one of the sweatshirts that SpiritHouse has been producing. We speak about culture, practice, and ritual as being important for our liberation. And that CPR, culture, practice, ritual, saves lives. And so I'm wearing my ritual sweatshirt today in honor of Collective Sun, which is, as Praycious said, our ritual community intervention performance piece. So I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you all may have. I'm really happy to be here. So yeah, let's get it on and popping. Let's go.
And I just want to say at the end of the video, we actually showed a short documentary that was done about SpiritHouse and Collective Sun too. So that can be found on SpiritHouse's website and be found on the actual session, but that was included in that as well. So yes, are there any initial questions? If not, I can start the conversation going and then we can go from there. But I want to give space for those that are here attending to bring their voices into the space first. So I'm going to start. So my first question is about the process in the rehearsal. And I know I can speak to this as well because I directed the piece in 2018. And so I was a part of that rehearsal room process. But I just wanted to know some of the tools that you use in that space to prepare the participants of the virtual performance for performing this in front of a group of people.
Yeah. So Collective Sun is an extremely personal performance piece. So we have sort of a base script, but there are spaces within that script for each individual to put their own flavor into it. It is a series of vignettes. And so there are some vignettes that are very personal about who you are, where you're from, the impact that incarceration has had on you personally. So anyone, and our performers are all, have all been just community members, Black folks who want to participate and who have something to say about the impact that prison and policing has on them. Oftentimes folks don't expect it to be as emotional and as personal as it is. And so we have to wrap a lot of space for healing and a lot of space for play and really getting to know each other into the rehearsal process. And so that folks can both stay connected to themselves, to who they are, and be able to perform something that is, like I said, very personal. The preparation for, I don't know that how much preparation there is for being able to perform in front of an audience, because again, this is an interactive performance piece. From the moment that audience members come into the room, they are interacting with the performers, all while they're waiting for the performance to start. There are people who are patrolling the audience. Some of the performers enter the stage from being seated in the audience. So you might be sitting next to someone who's performing in the piece and you don't know that until they actually get up and move on to the stage. And so folks have to kind of be ready to stay in character. And we do spend a lot of time during the rehearsals going through how to stay in character, how to deal with someone who may be hostile or very emotional, and being able to stay in character. The thing is that the performers are so very passionate about what's happening and what they're doing, and believe in the process so much that they are able to work through it. I mean, at this point, we've had 3 casts, a combination of 3 casts over the years, and it's been very healing. What the cast has said is that the process has just been very healing for them, and that's the goal. It's not just about the healing that happens with the audience members. It's also about taking these performers through a process of healing that they didn't necessarily have or understand that they deserved before entering into this process.
So just to thinking back on the process, the process that I created, there was a lot of singing. There was a lot of dancing. We did a dance circle at least once a week, which was really fun. And also just it prepared us to take on the heavier content. If we were doing heavier content today, we start with the moment of joy. Constant table work. So I know, like, in traditional settings, you do your table work for that week, and then you go off and do your you go off and get up on your feet. It is constant table work. We're constantly going back to the table to sit down and have a conversation, because it's that understanding of, we are dropping something heavy on you. And I know that you're, that this is potentially cracking something open that you were not intending. And so let's talk about it. It's providing space for, something happened crazy to me today. We're not even going to rehearse. We're just going to talk about it together.
Yeah.
We're going to leave, because we don't want to overload. The performance is not, although there is a performance at the end of it, that is not what the process is about. The process is about healing together with each other. I think we crafted that beautifully. And even to speak on like preparing someone to be a police officer or a CO, there are moments where I'm just going to pull out a random exercise that I remember. We would have folk be bystanders and just kind of stand and hold a position of strength. And then we'd have the rest of the folk be officers, and they would come in police. And we would have to, and we would, in that moment, we would allow for folk to push back on the police. Say everything you want to say to the police when they come and patrol you, right? Like, take that moment to really just express your anger, so that, one, you're tapping into that, and two, you're potentially feeling a release of what you actually can't do in the real world, which is push back on the police. Well, at least as a Black person, you're not able to do that. And so we recognize that. And I remember even doing that myself, being a director in this moment is not really directing. You are part of the ensemble. So everything that they would do, I would do myself. So I even remember someone like patrolling me and be like, "You're horrible," like, just speaking libelous things in my ear just because they could. And that moment that I got the opportunity to push back, I surprised my own self with how much pushback I gave. And so it's this like constant circle of being in conversation and doing some level of simulation with each other, so that we even get comfortable with being in each other's space in that way. Because again, these are not professional actors, these are community members, and some of them have been previously incarcerated in the past. And so what we don't want to do is trigger, and we want to provide some space for healing and a safe space of output of any anger or experiences that you have, and know that you're not going to get thrown away with that. And so I'm going to refer to the question in the chat. Thank you, Ellie. Is there a safe way to step out of a moment that is intense or heavy that you found is the most effective?
A safe way for the actors to step out?
Yes.
Okay. And you're speaking of like in the rehearsal setting?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think that what Praycious said is probably the thing that matters the most, is that we would just stop if it got too emotional, and allow for whatever that moment brings. So, one of the things that I was going to say after Praycious finished was that we did have one in our first cast. One of the cast members is a professional actor. And that's not why we asked him to be. He's actually a friend of ours. It was very difficult for him to actually perform this piece because he's used to separating himself, his personal life, and who he is as a man. Not that he hasn't performed in very difficult pieces, because he has. But our goal right from the beginning was that you are bringing yourself. You use your name. We don't shift the names of the folks. And you are bringing yourself the entire time. And it was extremely difficult for him to be himself in creating this performance. And so, and as we said, because from the beginning it is about healing for everyone, including the people who are performing, it is really important for that to happen. And so we built in enough rehearsal time. Again, the piece is actually only about 45 minutes long. But we built in enough rehearsal time in our schedule for however long it takes to actually move through healing something. Sometimes something will come up that someone didn't even remember, but the performers would bring it out for them. And the other thing about Collective Sun and about the work that SpiritHouse does is that we understand that we want people to heal collectively. So we want to create that safe space where you can say whatever needs to be said and be held by people. So we wouldn't want anyone to sort of just hold it in, pack it up, take it home, unless that's how they felt the most safe. But I think that we created right from the beginning a space of safety where folks could do those kinds of things. And we did a lot of different exercises, a lot of moving things through the body, because what we understand is that trauma is held in our bodies. So, it might be that we didn't have to stop and sit. It might be that we did some dancing or singing or yelling and shaking things off so that moment could, there goes the sun again, so that moment could move through the body and then able to move on.
I also will say that just to amplify that this piece cannot be set on a schedule, like on a date. Like in typical situations by, March 12th, that's the day that we're teching. Like, no. When we talk about a long rehearsal process and creating the space for that, we really mean that. So we get to a point when we're like, I think in a month we could pull this off. And then people are like, yes, like it is a co-signing of we are all prepared to move forward to the next step to prepare for performance. There is no set like production schedule that we're following. And I want to amplify what Deb said in the chat about being one who experienced a piece that was very personal from within the prison. Rehearsal time was what I needed to feel those raw feelings. And that is so real. You have to create the space for people to process, because if you don't create that space, especially in a prison system where sometimes the safe space that you have is in that class, and when you step out, you're in a completely different world.
Yes.
Like that is so intentional and so key. So I thank you for saying that in the chat, because that is key to the process that we do with Collective Sun. And I think for those that are working in the prison as well, have a similar process too. Scott, would you like to ask a question?
Sure. Thanks so much for being here, Momania. So I'm really just curious about detail about process. What I heard from you is a lot of kind of like theater of the oppressed and Augusto Boal and like the spectator, right? So there's no audience in a performance itself. It's completely interactive that way. As such, does the performance vary a great deal each night when you're actually in front of an audience, or is it pretty scripted by that point?
So it's scripted. It doesn't vary dramatically. It varies in some of the audience reactions. Mm-hmm. And so it may be that we take a little bit more time. For instance, there's one part where we do call audience members up to the front, and because they're being called to the front by police officers, there's resistance, for instance. So depending on the audience, one audience member will jump up and come to the front, and another audience member will say, F you, I'm not moving. And so then there's a whole interaction, because you are a police officer, and so you can't then just go to the next person. So there's a whole interaction then around what it takes to get this person to get up and go where they're being told to go. And that takes a while. It could take another person who is also being a police officer in that moment to join into that interaction. So far, we haven't been at the point where someone like walks out, because that certainly isn't what we're trying to have happen. But we do try to stay in character. And so there's a risk every night for that to happen. And one of the things that we learned after the first performance is that one of the people that we pull up, for instance, during that vignette, will be someone who knows that they're being called up. And so it sort of lays the groundwork for like an example for like other audience members following suit. But the script is set. Like I said, there's a little pieces in a couple of the vignettes where you get to put yourself into that place. So you write about yourself, you speak about yourself, but the vignettes are set.
So the journey, really, the focus of the journey, sorry to follow it up. The focus of the journey really is on the culture of care and healing that's generated through the creation of ensemble. Is that kind of the priority?
Yes. Yeah, I would say exactly that. And that we are taking, the audience becomes part of the ensemble that night. They are not just spectators. Like I said, from the moment that they walk in, they are not just spectators. They are engaged in this container where we are both experiencing what it means to be policed constantly and what it means to find joy and relief in that space. And so we see them as people that we care for, and that they are now here for an experience, to experience this with us.
I will also say, like, just bringing in a little Shakespeare in here. I know, like, one of the things that we do in terms of preparation, in terms of heckling that may come from the audience, we take people through that piece and we heckle. Like, we heckle folks so that someone's not taking off guard, because it is really hard to like stay in a mindset like, I'm here for law and order, and like I'm here for this. And that's, being a police officer, to embody that is harder, especially for Black folk, because that is not typically a space that we tend to access. But I remember, this is just bringing back all of the rehearsal process. And I just remember like us spending times and me sitting down and being like, you can't get me. No, I'm not interested. I'm not coming up there, And so there is some preparation that goes into that too, so that we're not just like throwing people to the fire, because it is also your family, right? Your family's come to support you. And if your mama runs up to you, is like, oh my gosh, such and such, as a police officer, you have to be like, okay, go sit down, and that's hard to do to your mom. So we create that. It's the truth. We create that in the room with each other, so that there's that familiarity there. And so me being the director, being your friend, could be like, I'm not going to sit down and you can't force me to do it. And they're already prepared for that type of energy that they're going to get from those that they love. Yeah. Although the question was kind of answered, Kate, I'm going to still let you ask it. No, you don't want to ask it? Are you sure?
Yeah, no, actually, as soon as I asked it, you both started touching upon those pieces. So it was already beautifully answered. Thank you to both of you.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
Well, my question for Nia is, I'm curious, do you actually take the piece into the prisons and have the inmates participate? Because your audience is going to be a whole different, your audience is going to be inmates. So if you take that into a prison and you have the script, but you're allowing the audience to participate and interact, it's also a way of pulling those inmates in to the program that's brought into the prison, to give them a way to, how do I want to say, a way to voice the way they're feeling. Now, in this interaction, are the people in the audience allowed to voice their feelings and be honest at what they're feeling?
Right. So we have not taken it into a prison yet. I'm not sure that we would be able to take it into prison because of the content. So that's something to look into in the future. We also haven't, we've been encouraged to take it to a police department and like to perform it for police officers. We have not done that yet. We have had police officers in our audience, but we have not actually taken it to the police department at this point. Although I'm thinking about it. We're seriously thinking about it. The audience members are allowed to voice a bit during the performance, but we have, after the performance, is a 45-minute community conversation. So we do a little Q&A piece, but really we have 45 minutes of people being able to process what they've been through in that performance together, so that we're encouraging folks to be able to put it all out before they have to leave, share their feelings, and be able to, because it brings up a lot, and it's different. It brings up one thing for Black men as opposed to what it may bring for a white woman. It still brings up something. And so we try to create space for folks to process and talk about it. That's part of the actual interactive performance piece. We didn't see having like, and we'll end and we'll have a Q&A. No, it ends when we've had the opportunity to process what we've experienced together. Precious,
Well,
do you
just to
think it
follow
could
up
be
on that,
accepted in a prison?
I'm gonna let Deb finish what she was saying.
Yes.
Well, what I was going to follow up with is that I would be very curious to take it to that point, and see how administration within a facility would deal with this. Could they actually sit back and let an inmate participate in a program in the Collective Sun atmosphere without being afraid of retaliation from the COs within the prison? Because I know, because I've been there, you have feelings, but you don't get to voice those feelings. And so depending on how long an individual is actually sentenced within the prison, it could be years and years and years and years that they've never been allowed to participate in something like this. So I would be curious to maybe even see if they're open to bringing it into the prison for the inmates to participate in.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes complete and total sense. The thing that's ringing up for me, just thinking about the depths of the piece, is that I do feel like Collective Sun, it's not something that I feel like can be brought in, as in we have performed on the outside and brought it in. I think it'd be something that we need to do with the inmates and have them.
I was just going to say that.
Create their own ensemble and their own version of it, because that is where the healing comes. You can get healing from being a spectator as well, but I think there'd be more impact on the inmates creating Collective Sun together and going through that process of healing together, rather than us just, taking people from the outside into the building. Do you want to respond to that, Mama?
I agree.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say the same thing. That's what I was going to say. I don't think that there would be a point in time that we would bring it to the prison for the people who are incarcerated, but that we could bring the process. And if we were able to bring the process and have folks who were incarcerated be the performers, that would be the ideal thing for them to be able to also participate in creating a process that felt safe for them, because that's most important, because we're going to leave. And so it has to be a process that feels safe for them. And so we can't do that without them. And I think that would be something that we would be interested in figuring out how to do.
Well, the organization which I'm working with, Open Hearts, Open Mind, they do actually go into the prisons and bring the arts to the inmates, which is how I became interactive with them, was because they allowed me to see that I had a voice where I felt I had no voice. And so I think working with the inmates in the prison is the way to do it also, because it's going to give them that voice that they never have while they're in there.
Can I just say one?
I would love to see you do that.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we should look into it. I just want to say one thing, is that we don't use the word inmate. We say people who are incarcerated.
That's fine.
I wanted to just give you that little, and this is, I'm just speaking from the people that I work with and the things that I have learned over some time, and that is that folks who are incarcerated have requested that we not use the word inmate, and we speak about them as people who are incarcerated, because they're more than that moment. And actually, yes, in the piece, part of one of the things that we do in the piece is making people feel like helping people to feel like what it feels to have a label that you are constantly wearing, that's all that you are, that it's all that people see you as. And that comes from conversations that we've had with people who have been incarcerated around what it feels like to walk around with this label at all times and not being seen as a person. So we try to say people who are incarcerated, and when folks come home, they're people formerly incarcerated or returning, people who are returning home.
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, Deb, I was just going to add to that as well. So much of what SpiritHouse and Nia and Praycious' work is, at least as far as I can tell right now, is so much about navigating trauma and finding the path to healing. And when you are inside, a lot of times, that's a really dangerous step to take as an individual when you're incarcerated, and that has to be done very deftly. I know Kurt Tofflin does it amazingly well with the circles that he creates and the conversation that happens that's prompted in a lot of instances by Shakespeare, but also just by the environment in which these guys find themselves in. So I just wanted to put that out there, because as Nia said before, trauma sits at a cellular level. And we don't want to advocate for folks to be doing trauma intervention in an incarcerated setting, because that could be dangerous for the men and women who are part of that process.
Okay, can I just add to that my piece that I wrote and was able to do within the prison had a good deal to do with trauma. And I had one of the most traumatic things happen to me while I was incarcerated, and that's the love of my life passed away. And I wasn't able to be there with him, and I couldn't hold his hand, and I couldn't tell him goodbye, and I couldn't tell him I loved him. And I was able to go to this organization that came within, and they are the ones that gave me the ability to share my trauma with 200 other women that was within the facility, many of them going through the same thing that I had went through, never being allowed to have those feelings. I don't know if people understand that, but they don't want you to have those feelings within there. So within the arts, I was able to put a piece together, and I was able to tell my story from the very beginning to the very end when he passed away. And I was able to thank those girls that picked me up off of the ground when I had fallen there, finding out that he had passed away. And the thing that I remember the most about that is that I had to deal with those raw feelings through the rehearsals, through making this piece what I wanted this piece to be. And when I did that, once I had finished it, I sat in the middle of the stage and I wept. And I wept. And I looked up, and through my tears, I saw 200 women on their feet giving me a standing ovation for being able to let them feel a raw feeling and being able to do it from the inside. Does that make sense?
That sure
and
does.
They would come up to me for weeks and weeks and tell me Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Deb, for doing that for us. We never thought that we would have the ability. And through my piece, I encouraged them to let those feelings come out. And I walked them through it as I walked myself through it, as I went from real life to a place that no one should have to go. And it was amazing. I have to tell you, as being one from the inside, it was the most incredible experience I ever had in my life, which in turn, once I released from prison, I am now a full-time college student, and theater arts is my major. So I've actually participated in a Shakespeare festival, and I've got to be on stage, and I played Sir Thomas Erpingham in Henry V, and that piece that they allowed me to do set me in motion to where my life is going now. I may not have my husband, but I have this, and so that's just giving you a little bit of what it feels like to be on the inside and do something like this. So that's when I say I encourage you to take things like this in there and allow those incarcerated individuals to feel, be able to feel through a performance, because it is the most amazing thing that you can give to one of them. And I'm going to shut up now because I've probably taken up too much time, but I just, a lot of people do not understand what it's like on the other side of that razor wire. And my voice is to let it known, let people know what it's like, so that these organizations that go into the prisons can feel free to do and base their curriculum on the exercises that we did before rehearsal, we did after rehearsal. These little things that they taught us to do helped us when we went back into the world of incarceration. We were able to cope in a different way, if that makes sense. They gave us an avenue of coping by using these exercises on the outside of the program, which just happens to be within the facility. And I still, to this day, if I find myself getting tense, I can refer to those exercises, and I remember how close it brought us as a collective group within the facility, doing those exercises together. It taught us how we could mingle.
You're speaking a lot about,
Go ahead.
Yes, you're speaking a lot about the process that Praycious was speaking about earlier, which is everything that you're saying is the way that we use our process with folks outside who are performers, and also the way that we, again, engage the audience from start to finish, so that they also have healing practices that they get to take with them when they leave. I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. I want to offer my condolences for the fact that you went through that kind of a trauma where you lost someone that you loved and you were unable to be with him. That is trauma that you should not have had to experience, that no one should have had to experience. And so I want to offer my condolences for that, and really thank you for talking a little bit about what it means to be someone who is incarcerated, and where bringing theater and bringing art into that space allows for just a little bit of time for you to be able to experience your humanity, which is sort of what I feel like you're saying, Your humanity is not honored when you are incarcerated. And so the role that we play as artists when we bring a different modes of art and activities into the prison is to create and provide a space for folks to be able to have some time to just feel their humanity. But I also would say one of the cautions, and I think what Scott was bringing up earlier, is that we also don't want to go in there assuming that we have the capacity to do the work that sometimes some trained healers do. So we have to find a balance between being an artist, being people who create a space for humanity, and not assuming the role of a therapist where we could cause harm because we don't have the tools that we need to when we crack something open. And so the thing about Collective Sun that we've learned over the years is from start to finish is how much people are cracked open by experiencing this performance. And so we've done the work to make sure that we're able to hold that. But that took us a little bit of time to be able to gain those kinds of skills, because the last thing that we want to do is to walk out of a space leaving people feeling harmed, leaving people worse than they were when we came in, because we wanted to have a good performance, which can happen. Right. You can have a powerful performance, and people can leave traumatized, and that's not what we want to have happen, as we are taking people right to the very edge of what they've experienced in their lives, or some people who may not have experienced it and are now being taken to the very edge for the first time in their lives. And so sometimes there are people who have written things, or who are performers who want to take people to the edge and want them to leave with that. And so it's a conscious choice that we made as people who have experienced these traumas, to say, we don't want people to leave with that heaviness. We want people to be able to still feel hopeful, to still feel like they have access to healing in ways that they didn't understand that they had before. And I think we've done a really good job of being able to do that. And I do think that we could have, Precious and I, maybe later we'll have conversations about, what it could possibly mean if we were to do, to bring this work into the prisons, but we haven't done that yet. I wanted to see if there are any other questions. Precious, I can't see the chat or anything.
Yeah, there are actually. So Carla, do you want to speak on your question, or do you want for me to ask it? And I also want to thank you, Deb, for bringing your perspective into the space. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is really, really great conversation. Thanks so much for coming and hosting a session. I just and sorry, I was just a tiny bit late, so if y'all already spoke to this, it's fine. But I went to a show recently that had trigger warnings all over the place right as you got to the door, and it dealt with some pretty intense issues, and it just, in my mind, I loved what they brought out, but in my mind it just wasn't quite cooked yet, and I just wonder how you guys handle and you kind of spoke to it already by leaving someone with hope, right? And you don't want to leave an audience member traumatized. But I don't know, have y'all run across this where people post trigger warnings, and I don't know, just a general, what has been your experience in that as far as like the audience is concerned? Yeah.
So I think that what I would say is, one of the things that I've learned is that, it just begins with where it begins, where you start. What is your goal? And, I was writing a personal piece several years ago that I actually never finished, around being a survivor of sexual assault. And I had so much anger and rage and hurt, and my thoughts was that I was just going to share all of that. And I was going to put it on the stage, and I was going to, expose all of it. And I had someone who was reading what I was writing, and they were saying, but what is your goal? Like, if there are women in the audience who have experienced what you've experienced, are you sure that by portraying it in this way that it won't be more traumatic and triggering for them, where it might be healing for you in the process because you have put it on the stage, you have put it all out, and you might be in the place because you've written about it that you can do that, but you're not 100% sure that everyone who comes in to that space to see the performance is at the same place as you are. And so it's not that I become responsible for anyone else's healing, but if my goal is at the end that no matter where you are in your healing, you're feeling some sort of hope or that you have access to more healing, then that shifts the way that we write what we write, or the way that we perform what we perform. And then being open to the feedback of the audience, so that, Collective Sun has taken on many, 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 many iterations before we had the full mounting of the piece. And audience feedback were the things that helped shift the performance into what it was. We had a young man tell us once, because we do a lot around being young Black men, and we had a young Black man tell us at the end of one of our staged readings that, I hear you when you talk about what it's like to be a mother of a Black man, but you don't know what it's like to be a Black man who feels stifled all of his life because his mother won't let him go because she's so afraid of what could happen to him out there. And that was profound for me to hear someone say, yeah, your protection is great, but it's impacting my ability to live a full life. And that then went into the piece because it was important. And so I'd say things like feedback, giving audience feedback and being willing to adapt so you understand that it's not just about you. It's also about the people that you are engaging with in this performance.
Yeah, I can also speak to the trigger warning a little bit. We don't formally put out trigger warnings like you typically see if you go to a show now, where there are no gunshots or anything of that nature in the piece. I don't believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe there's one act of violence in there. And it's very beautifully choreographed. It's very airy. It's not this, it's not so simulated as it is if you were to go to, a theater and they're doing a show about something in particular. But Collective Sun is breathing. It is living, it is breathing. So that feedback that we do get from the audience does shape how we show up in the next space. And we also are very, I would say, intentional with the audience, because although we have toured this piece, it's been performed in many places down south, and I think a little bit up north too. We know the audience in which we're going into. It has not ever been set at a main stage theater where they have their particular donor base to cater to. Like, we know what audience we're going into. We know who's going to see this piece, and so there is clarity around what the piece is, and I just think of it's framed as a ritual that deals with the effects of mass incarceration and policing on the body. That is a trigger warning within itself. It is, though, because that is letting people know what they're stepping into, and so I think that also plays a big role in it, because this is so community centered. It's not something that, although, I don't even think ideally, I have big dreams as a theater person to bring it to a big theater, right, and put it on a main stage. But that was not the intent when we created it. The intention was not for that. It was intended to stay within and to adapt and to shape with the community in mind.
Yes.
So I hope that provides a little clarity.
That's actually a really good point, Precious, and I forgot to say that. So yes, prior to we don't choose to go somewhere. We go where we're invited. So the people who ask us to bring Collective Sun or to do Collective Sun, their role before we even come is for the community to be prepared for us coming. And so it is very true what Praycious said, like we're prepared for who the audience is, whether it is on a college campus, whether it is in a community center, in a neighborhood, we are prepared for who the audience is, and we've been invited by that community. And so they have a role before we even come in making sure that their community is prepared for what they're going to experience. And we don't just leave either. You know, again, we have the conversations, and we're available after to continue in conversations, to offer workshops, to offer some of the healing practices that we have to help people to move through what they're experiencing in their body. This is the primary purpose of this is the practice of healing, not the viewing of a performance.
I just want to note that we are at 3:54, 12:54 for those who are on PST, and all the other time zones. We are at 54. And Scott, do you just want to ask your question directly as the last question, if that's okay?
Yeah. I'm just curious to hear what some of those healing practices that you found particularly effective are.
Yep. So a lot of it is breathing and moving the body. So in the performance, there are spaces where we collectively breathe and we collectively move our bodies so that we can let the trauma flow out. So those are some of the practices, and other practices are meditation. And one of the things that I spoke of when I did the session earlier in the week, that knowing who we are, so that we always see ourselves as more than our worst mistakes. And so it is a healing practice to really begin to know who you are, where you come from, who you come from, whose shoulders you stand on, to be able to articulate those things, to be able to introduce yourself as this person who is more than your worst mistake, and to be able to do that constantly. And so helping people to introduce themselves differently, to see themselves differently. And again, trauma lives in the body. It is not something that lives in the brain. And so we have to teach people how to breathe and how to move things up and out, how to crack it open and move it out.
I would also say that there's a lot of like body swipe, which I could like body swiping that happens, and we actually do that in the play of like actually wiping the energy off of you, and it's a moment of like, I've always seen it as a moment of transformation, because once you wipe that energy and you wipe that, well, of course you can't wipe trauma off, but you know, still getting whatever energy is coming to you off of your body, you are a different person at that point. And it's one of the mechanisms that we use to show a transition in character in the piece, because the police officer is not always a police officer. Like we ebb and flow out of that role. And that's something that happens as well. And like I said, it is also really, really based in conversation. We are table reading all the time. So we are constantly in conversation. And that proves healing as well, because you're having that conversation with the community that you care about and that you trust, and that you know you can bring that to who can hold it, because we have created a space where we can hold each other's trauma together and move through those moments together. So, yeah, I believe we're at time. Scott, if you want to take us out, like we discussed earlier, I want to thank Mama Nia for coming today. I want to thank all of you all for submitting questions and being in conversations. The chat was thriving, and I agree with everything that was said.
I guess I will end it right there unless anyone has anything to say. I'm going to stop recording now.
Thank you
so much.